So now that we're done building, and cabling inside of the HYTE Y60 mid-tower chassis, now we're ready to install Windows, install the drivers, flash the BIOS, and get ready to start gaming. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do all that. So before we actually get started on the system, let's go to another system real quick, download the drivers, prepare a Windows 10 or 11 install drive, and then we can get started over here. So for this part, we don't actually need to download all the drivers right now. You can always download them later, but you will need to download and create your Windows 10 or Windows 11 install media. So typically it would be one for the Windows 10 or Windows 11 install media, and another for the BIOS at least, and the drivers if you want to put them here. But the drivers can go on the Windows 10 or 11 install media. The BIOS cannot, because the BIOS has to be on a FAT32 formatted thumb drive. So let's get started with that real quick. So on the computer, first off, we're going to go to gigabyte.com. I'll put the link down below in case you have this exact motherboard. Then we'll go over to the support site. And then here we're going to select driver OS, whatever your version is. I'll select Windows 11. We'll download all of the drivers, so sound. Chipset we'll skip out on, and we'll go over that in a second. Download LAN, which is your Ethernet. Open up WLAN BT for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. We'll come back to the BIOS in 1 second. Then we'll download RGB Fusion, App Center, and any other one you might want there, but I'm just downloading those. And now we'll open up another tab and we'll go to AMD.com. Then we'll click on drivers and support. We'll select chipset, AMD socket AM4, and then X570, and click submit. And then here we'll select whichever version we have. Again, we're downloading 11. So we'll download the AMD Chipset Driver for Windows 11. Then you can also install the AMD RAID installer and the AMD RAID driver. We don't need those for this particular install, but in case you do, we'll go ahead and download those. And then we'll come back to the AORUS Master. We'll go to BIOS, and then we'll download the latest and greatest BIOS update. I highly recommend, especially on a brand new system, to flash with the very latest BIOS. That way, if you notice from the very first BIOS that it has on the board to the very latest, you have all of those fixes in your system. That way you can avoid any and all headaches that those might have given you. So now that we're done there, we'll go ahead, open up a File Explorer window. We'll go to Downloads, and then we'll go ahead and copy everything onto our drivers disk, and we can go ahead and expand those on the new system. The reason I always download all the drivers is sometimes you're going to have issues on your brand new system that the Ethernet won't pick up on that Windows 10 or Windows 11 install. If you have that driver, you don't need to go to Windows Update or anything. You have it right there, install it, and then you're on your network. And while that's transferring, I did forget. Let's go ahead and download the video driver as well. Go to NVIDIA.com, click on drivers, then go to Geforce, Geforce RTX 30 series, 3080 Ti, Windows 11, and we'll go ahead and click search. Then we'll download the latest and greatest NVIDIA driver. Then we'll also copy that one over. All right, now that that's done, we'll go ahead and take out that thumb drive. And then we'll insert another thumb drive. This one has to be FAT32 because it's going to be for our BIOS update. So It's the USB drive H. It may be different, of course, on yours. So right click on that drive, then click Format. Make sure it says FAT32, not exFAT or NTFS. It has to be FAT32, and we can name it BIOS. The name doesn't really matter. And you definitely want to check quick format. If not, it will take a very long time. Then click Start and OK. And OK over here. So now we have our BIOS disk, and we're going to extract those BIOS files. Right click on them, copy, and then we're going to paste them in the BIOS directory or the BIOS drive that we just created. Now I'm using these shortcuts over here, these pinned, but you would be using your BIOS over here. This is your BIOS drive, and then your downloads, where you download them from. I'm not going to show you in this video how to create the Windows 10 or Windows 11 install media. I have other videos that I'll go ahead and link at the end of this video how to create those, and you can check that out afterwards. But now all we do is we'll grab our drivers and our BIOS thumb drives and go to the new machine. Since this is going to be the first time we turn on the machine, I'm going to go ahead and put on the side panel for any potential heating issues or anything. I want to be able to catch everything quick. Now, all three of the thumb drives I've used are the same, so I've just labeled them: drivers, BIOS, and Windows. Going to go ahead and install or plug in the BIOS one first. How is it every time you plug it in it's wrong? Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and turn on the system. And then we'll start tapping the delete key to go into the BIOS. Okay. So in the BIOS, we'll come over to QFlash down here. Then we'll go to Update BIOS. And then we'll select the latest BIOS file. And then click the right arrow. Are you sure you want to update BIOS? Yes. And so right now it's just reading or verifying the file. So then over here on the left side, we can see we're coming from BIOS version F4B, made in February 16th, 2022, to BIOS version F4D, made in May 12th, 2022. This might take a minute. And then we'll click on Press Start to update the BIOS. It automatically restarts your machine. Now you're going to want to hit delete to go back into the BIOS. So as you saw, after I flashed the BIOS, it automatically restarted it for me. And then I tapped delete to go into the BIOS so that we can configure the BIOS. Now, right after we save the BIOS, I'm going to go ahead, shut off the machine, do one quick thing, and then we're going to install Windows 11. Stay tuned for that. All right, so now that we're in the BIOS, the very first thing we're going to do before we set anything is we're going to go to Save and Exit, and we're going to go ahead and click Load Optimized Defaults and click Yes. So every time you flash a brand new BIOS, it's always a great idea to go ahead and load BIOS Optimized Default. It goes ahead and brings up all of the changes the brand new BIOS made and brings them up to the forefront. It's good practice to do that. Even though we're going to go ahead and change a bunch of stuff, you should always do that. The other thing, now that we're going to go ahead and configure the BIOS, these are defaults. Your system is going to have different components. So if you have any questions on that, go ahead and ask below. I'd be more than happy to help you out on that. Under Spread Spectrum, we'll go ahead and disable that. That's a funny word. And then we'll come down here to Extreme Memory Profile. If your memory does have Extreme Memory Profiles or XMP, we'll go ahead and enable that profile. Now what that does, it goes ahead and sets all of your memory voltages and timing and everything down here. And then advanced memory settings, memory subtimings. The XMP goes ahead and sets all these for you. So we'll go ahead and then click settings, platform power, and we're just going over checking everything. Nothing we need to do here. IO port. This is where your video card would be, PCIe slot 1. HD audio controller enabled unless you have an external sound card. PCIe by 16 bifurcation. We'll leave that auto. Above 4G decoding, we'll go ahead and enable that, as well as resize bar, which gives us potentially more performance on our video cards, or better performance, I should say. App Center download and install. Since we've gone ahead and downloaded that on our own, we'll just disable that. Miscellaneous. If you don't want your system to have LED lights on when your system's off, you'll go ahead and disable that. I'll leave mine on. Same as here, if you put your machine on sleep or hibernate, you'll want to disable that, but I like it on. Then for the hardware button on the motherboard, if we wanted to reset or power on or off, I'll leave that default. These are all the onboard button light. And let's see anything else important. Our BIOS 16 is going to be Gen 4. If you have Gen 3, you'd want to set Gen 3 or 2 or 1, or you can always leave it auto. PCIe slot configuration, Gen 4 as well. I'll go ahead and leave these defaulted for now. AMD CPU FTPM for Windows 11 installation enabled. Trusted Computing or TPM, we'll go ahead and leave all that enabled as well. System info just gives us general information on our system. CPU, how much memory we have, our LAN MAC address. We go under boot. This tells us our current boot order. Here it has our Sabrent as the main drive, our thumb drive, then the secondary drive, which again we're going to go ahead and disconnect, and then the Sabrent Rocket again, and generic USB, and we'll go ahead and leave CSM support disabled. Now we're going to go ahead, save and exit. We're going to save and exit and then shut off the machine because we're going to disconnect the 500 gig drive. So save and exit. Now I'm going to go ahead, press the power button, hold the power button to turn off the machine. Now we'll just go ahead and take the side panel off. Simply disconnect the data portion of our WD Blue 500 gig. The only reason we're doing this is because this is our secondary drive. The primary is the Sabrent drive, an M.2 SSD. We're disconnecting this so that Windows does not install any of the boot partitions on that drive. And then we'll just go ahead and put this back. You could leave it off, but I'll put it back on just for now. And then we can continue with our install. Now we'll go ahead and turn on the computer. Now we'll go back into the BIOS. Okay, and it puts us in the easy mode. Go into advanced, boot, and now we'll select boot option number 1. We'll make that our generic flash disk, which is the Windows 11 installer. Then we'll go ahead, save and exit. Okay, then here, select your language to install, time and currency format or keyboard input method. I'll leave that defaulted and next. Then we're going to go ahead and install now. If you have a key, go ahead and plug it in here. If you don't, just click I don't have a product key. Microsoft lets you use it free for 3 months or so. I don't have a product key. Then select whichever version you plan on having or whichever version your product key reflects. 11 Pro, next. And then I accept the Microsoft license terms and next. We'll do custom install. Because I've already had Windows on this drive before, we're just going to go ahead in and delete them. If I would have left the other drive in, you would have seen drive 1 and it might be a little confusing. So always better leave only one drive in there. So delete all these partitions, which means we're erasing whatever was on that disk before. Okay, so now there's only one partition that says unallocated space. Then we'll click next. I'm not creating a new partition. I'm not loading a driver. I'm not formatting. Just select this drive and click next. And then it starts copying and installing and extracting. So it's going to take about 7 minutes or so. I'll fast forward it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and restart now. At this point, we can remove the thumb drive. Select your country or region. United States for me, yes. Select your keyboard layout. Again, United States. Want a second? Nope. Skip. Now, if your network is connected and everything, it'll go ahead and download updates if there are updates available. This motherboard has Wi-Fi and Ethernet, so one of the two or both could be connected already. Okay, then let's name your device. Next. Okay, how would you like to set up this device? Set up for personal use. Next. And let's go ahead, add a Microsoft account. No, I'm good, thank you. Maybe later. Sign in options. We'll do an offline account. We'll do a skip for now. And then who's going to be using this device? I will be. Oh, there's no 7th. And no password for now. And you can go ahead and leave all these settings or change as you will. I'll click accept for now. All right, so we are in Windows now and we are connected to the network. If you're not, don't freak out. I'll show you how to do that in 1 second. So now we're gonna go ahead and plug in our driver's thumb drive. Okay, so open folder. Now we're gonna go ahead and just copy all of this into a folder on the C drive. Now you could always do it from your thumb drive, but I like to copy everything local first and then afterwards install from local. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is all of these that have the little folder with the zipper icon, these are all zip files. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and delete the 2 BIOS files. We don't need those anymore. MB driver Realtek, that is your audio. So I'm gonna go ahead and move that out of the zip drive, out of the zip file, sorry. Okay, delete that. 630, that is my network driver. Delete this. That is my onboard Ethernet driver. This is the App Center. Okay, and now get rid of this. And RGB Fusion. I'll go ahead, export RGB Fusion or extract RGB Fusion. We don't really need the RAID driver, but I'll leave that in there just in case. But now the very first thing we're going to install is always the chipset. That is the framework or the foundation of this house. So double click on the AMD chipset, yes. So now we'll just go ahead and leave all this selected and click install. Now when we're done, we'll go ahead and click close, and now we'll manually restart the computer. Now when we're back in Windows, go back into File Explorer and the location where we've extracted the drivers to, And now we'll go ahead and install the audio drivers. Then the Ethernet drivers. The extension, which is the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Then we'll install the RGB software. Setup, yes, and install. This is so that we can set up all the RGB lighting inside of the system. Okay, with that done, we'll come into the App Center. And with that done, now we'll come, the very last one is the video driver. Then agree and continue. Select whichever you'd like here. I'll leave these two, agree and continue. Custom, next. And then we'll go ahead, leave everything here. And even though it's a brand new install, and typically I like to do DDU before, but perform a clean install goes ahead and removes anything older NVIDIA for everything newer. So next. So whenever software asks you to restart, it's always best to restart. So I'll do a restart later, and then I'll go ahead and restart manually. Okay, now if we right click on the start button and click Device Manager, you'll notice under here there are no red X's or any kind of anything expanded like this. When you open up Device Manager and you don't see any red X's or anything expanded like that, that means everything's installed correctly. All of your drivers are installed correctly, and that leaves you to have your system performing as best as it can. Now mind you, you can always go in and tweak things and make it perform better, but at least this gives you a good foundation and a good way to make sure that nothing is going to be blue screening. Other potential issues could be maybe you have your memory set up incorrectly. That causes a ton of issues, but software wise, you know you're good. So let's keep going. And then at times you will get this message, there's a new version of the App Center. We'll click OK. And this opens up the AORUS App Center. Now here we can see Gigabyte apps, different Windows settings, and third-party software. We can also do live updates, so click up here. Now this is going to check Gigabyte for any updates for the motherboard, be it BIOS, drivers, any third-party software we have from any Gigabyte software, I should say. Here it finds a few. First thing I recommend you do is uncheck that. Don't let it download anything for you first off. Okay, easy tune, that way you don't have any mistakes. So we'll go ahead and, well, thankfully no mistakes there. And so checking everything here and recommended AMD chipset, even though we downloaded the latest and greatest, we'll go ahead as per AORUS's or Gigabyte's recommendation. Now I don't like to have all this stuff here as well, but you always have the option, and definitely get rid of this. You don't want Norton on there. And then you can just do an install to update everything. So I'm gonna unfortunately have to click cancel on this. I am having some internet issues right now, but definitely you want to run this to stay on the latest and greatest. So we'll go ahead and close out of here. Then something, even though right now I'm having ISP issues, is click on the start button, type update, go to check for updates, and download all your updates. Now, after you download your updates and you restart, I recommend keep going back in there. That way there are going to be newer, bigger, and better updates to fix previous updates. So keep going back in there. It might take 3 or 4 times before all of the updates are done on your system. And then that way, at least you know all the updates, everything is complete there. So after all that's done, you'll want to click on the start button again, type in power, then choose a power plan, open this up, high performance, and then change your plans. If you want your monitor to turn off after 15 minutes, do that. I always choose never here, never put my computer to sleep automatically at least. After that, change advanced power settings. Slide over here, never let that turn off your hard disk. Click apply after that. And then of course you can come in over here and set any and all power settings. And then okay, and then save changes, and that will also help you get the most out of your system. Then of course afterwards we'll right click on the desktop, then select display settings. Now I'm going through a capture card, but if we scroll down a little bit and we click advanced display, right here, if you have a monitor that goes above 60 Hertz, you'll want to set it to 120, 144, as high as your monitor can go. Again, I'm going through a capture card, so the capture card will only allow me 60 Hertz. You select that, close that, and then right click again on your desktop, show more options. Because I have NVIDIA, it'll be a NVIDIA control panel. If you had AMD, you select the AMD equivalent, agree and continue. And then you open it up here, and you can make any other changes you'd like over here to optimize your performance. Then also what I did with the refresh rate, if you came under change resolution, you could do that here as well. Just a different way of doing it. And now this monitor does have FreeSync. I can enable that as well. But since I'm going through the capture card, I don't see that right now. Then we can go ahead and close it. Then afterwards, when we're done optimizing and all that good stuff, we can come here under RGB Fusion. And then it shows our AORUS Master and our RGB LED over here. We can select anything we want here for RGB, or we can turn it off if we'd like. Unfortunately, we need to download EVGA Precision for the video card, but you know, we can select however we'd like it to, and RGB Fusion does a good job. And we'll select So in this video, I've shown you how to take your system to the next level right after you build it, how to download all the drivers and the BIOSes, prepare the thumb drives for Windows installation, drivers installation, and BIOS flashing, and then get everything installed, updated, and flashed on your system, and then do a little optimizing. Now, mind you, there's a lot further that you can go. I gave you the basics here. Of course, your system is going to be different than mine, but you know, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, please do leave them down below. I'm always happy and willing to help anyone. But let me know what you think of everything we've gone over in this video. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What could I have done to improve it? But all in all, I think the overall build, the cable management, and the OS and driver installation went without a hitch. Unfortunately, I couldn't do everything I wanted to because of my router. I found out after I recorded that my router died, so I had to re-record this portion. And well, I did get it replaced, unfortunately way too late. But anyway, you get the gist of what I did and what needed to be done. Easy enough. So anyway, this is Iggy with ThisBytesForYou. Again, showing you how to, after you've built and wire managed your system, how to install the OS, flash the BIOS, install the drivers, all the good stuff to get you up and running and gaming. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou out. See you guys.